The knock came again, not polite, not angry, just desperate. Evelyn froze with one sock on, the other lost in the dark. Christmas light from the window cut a thin stripe across the hall. Her heart answered before her mind could form a thought. No one knocked on her door anymore, not on Christmas. She stood still and listened, counting the seconds like prayers. The house held its breath with her old wood and old grief. Outside, wind scraped the porch rail as if searching for a way in. The smell of cold pine pushed through the cracks around the frame. Her hands hovered near her chest, unsure where to rest. In her kitchen, a turkey sat untouched, still wrapped in plastic. She had bought it out of habit, not hunger, not hope. A single plate waited on the table like an accusation in porcelain. The radio was off, because music made the silence obvious. She told herself this day was just another day in disguise. The knock softened, then returned, slower, like it was tiring out. Evelyn moved toward the door, as if she were walking underwater. Every step creaked, and each creak sounded like a warning. Her fingers found the deadbolt, cold enough to sting. She whispered, "Who is it?" though she didn't want an answer. She pressed her forehead to the door, and felt the chill seep in. A memory flashed, her father's voice, his laugh, then the sudden quiet, another flash, her own voice, shouting years ago. Door slammed, goodbye. The hallway seemed narrower than it had yesterday, tighter with time. She tasted metal in her mouth, the flavor of old panic. When she finally turned the lock, the click sounded too loud. She opened the door only a crack, keeping her body hidden. Wind rushed in, carrying snow dust and the sharp scent of roads. Something low and living shifted on the porch, barely moving. Evelyn's breath caught, because it wasn't a person standing there. A dog sat curled against her welcome mat, trembling but quiet. His fur was silvered with age and scattered with tiny ice crystals. A worn collar hugged his neck, and something dangled from it. He didn't bark, didn't beg, only lifted tired eyes to hers. And in that look, Evelyn felt her loneliness finally look back. Evelyn stared at him as if he were a mistake she couldn't erase. The dog's ribs moved under his coat, slow, careful, conserving heat. A thin whine rose and fell, not dramatic, more like a sigh. Behind her, the house waited, warm and empty in equal measure. She kept the door half open, as if warmth were a contract. "Where did you come from?" she asked, voice dry with disuse. The dog blinked, and a snowflake melted on his nose. The porch light flickered once, buzzing like a tired insect. Evelyn noticed his paws, first, raw around the edges. Someone had let him walk too long without caring where he landed. She knelt, careful, as if sudden kindness might shatter him. The collar tag swung, tapping softly against the metal ring. It was not a name tag, not the usual bright little bone. It was a small plastic card, the kind shelters clip on quickly. Her throat tightened, because she knew what those cards meant. Inside, the heater hummed like a distant ocean, steady and indifferent. The living room held a bare corner where a tree used to stand. No ornaments, no stockings, no wrapping paper, no laughter stuck in corners. The air smelled like coffee that had grown cold in its mug. Evelyn's Christmas had become a day she survived, not a day she lived. Her fingers brushed the dog's head, and he leaned into it. That small surrender hit her harder than any human apology. She felt her own hands remember what they were made for. For a second, she pictured her mother's hands in flour, in warmth. Then she swallowed the image down, because it still hurt to see. She stood and looked down the quiet street, empty and white. No neighbors in sight, no footprints leading away, no car idling. Only wind and the distant crack of ice shifting in gutters. Evelyn realized the dog hadn't wandered here by accident. He had been placed, like a package, like a problem. She opened the door wider, letting the heat spill out like mercy. The dog hesitated, waiting for permission he no longer expected. Evelyn said, "Come on," and her voice sounded unfamiliar, softer. He stepped inside with slow dignity, nails clicking on the floor, and the house, for the first time in years, made room for breath. The dog stood in the entryway, unsure where safety ended. Evelyn watched him watch her, both of them learning the moment. She took a towel from the closet and folded it like a promise. When she set it down, he lowered himself onto it carefully. His body shook once, then stilled, as if he feared taking too much. She unhooked the plastic card from his collar with trembling fingers. It had smudged ink and a barcode, the clinical language of abandonment. Senior male, It read, along with a number and a short note. Evelyn's eyes blurred, because the note was only 2 words long. Found alone, it said, as if that explained everything. The words pulled her backward into her own history without warning. There had been a Christmas when she was the one found alone, not in a shelter, but in a hospital hallway, waiting for news. She remembered fluorescent lights, the smell of antiseptic, the hollow beep. She remembered deciding that loving meant losing, so she chose less love. Evelyn's phone sat on the counter, face down, like a sleeping animal. She could call the shelter number printed on the card. She could do the responsible thing, the clean thing, the quick thing. That thought should have relieved her, but it didn't. Instead, it felt like pushing a tired soul back into the cold. The dog lifted his head when she moved, tracking her with quiet fear. His eyes held a question he didn't know how to ask. Not will you keep me, but will you hurt me too? Evelyn's chest tightened, because she recognized that question. She had asked it once, and she had never truly stopped asking it. She filled the bowl with water and set it down near the towel. The dog drank slowly, as if each swallow had to be earned. Then she poured kibble from an old bag she kept for stray cats. He ate with care, pausing between bites to glance up at her. Gratitude, she realized, could be louder than any bark. From the window, the world looked like a postcard she didn't belong in. Neighboring houses glowed with trees and garlands, bright and busy. Evelyn's home had been dark by choice, a kind of mourning she managed. But now, a small sound filled the room, breathing that wasn't hers. It made the silence less safe, and also less cruel. She touched the dog's collar again, and whispered, "You're not alone now." The words surprised her, because she hadn't planned to say them. The dog's tail moved once, barely, as if testing hope. Evelyn felt her eyes burn, and she let them. Somewhere inside her, a locked door shifted, not open yet, but moving. Evelyn brewed coffee out of sheer instinct, needing something normal. The scent rose warm and bitter, filling the kitchen with memory. She poured 2 mugs before catching herself, then stared at the mistake. One mug sat useless, like a chair pulled out for a ghost. The dog watched her from the doorway, head tilted, patient. Temporary, she told herself, gripping the counter until her knuckles whitened. Just until she called the shelter, just until someone else took over. That was the rule she had lived by since the last heartbreak. Do your duty, keep your distance, don't build a home in your chest. She repeated it like a hymn, hoping it would make her steady. Her mind supplied a list of practical reasons, sharp and tidy. A senior dog meant vet bills, medication, accidents, endings. Evelyn had learned to fear endings more than she feared being alone. She pictured another goodbye, another empty spot on the floor. The thought felt like stepping onto thin ice, but her body betrayed her, moving closer anyway, slow and careful. She knelt again, smoothing the fur between the dog's ears. He exhaled, a long breath that sounded like relief becoming real. His warmth seeped into her palm, a small transfer of trust. Evelyn's throat tightened, because she couldn't pretend that meant nothing. In the living room, an unopened box sat beneath the window. It held her old ornaments, packed away after the last family fight. She had told herself she was done with symbols, done with hoping. Yet the dog's presence made the bare corner look like a wound. A missing tree suddenly felt less like strength and more like surrender. Evelyn walked to the phone, then stopped inches away from it. Her reflection shimmered in the dark screen, older than she felt inside. She saw the lines around her eyes, carved by years of bracing. She heard her ex-husband's voice in her head, calling her cold. She had denied it, but today the word echoed louder. The dog stood, shaky, and took a few steps toward her. He didn't crowd her, didn't demand, just closed the distance gently. His body leaned against her leg, a quiet claim of companionship. Evelyn's breath caught, and she rested a hand on his back. Her heart argued with her logic, and her heart was winning. She whispered, "I don't know if I can do this." The dog looked up, and in his eyes was no judgment, only need. Evelyn realized she wasn't afraid of responsibility. She was afraid of caring enough to hurt when it ended. And that fear, she understood, had already stolen too much time. Evelyn found an old blanket in the linen closet, soft and worn. It smelled faintly like lavender detergent and the past. She spread it near the heater, making a nest beside the vent. The dog watched, ears slightly lifted, as if he couldn't believe it. When she patted the blanket, he stepped forward like a careful prayer. She sat on the floor, surprising herself with the motion. Her knees protested, but she ignored the ache, needing closeness more. The dog lowered his head into her lap, and his weight felt honest. Evelyn's fingers moved through his fur, finding burrs, tangles, old scars. Each bump was a sentence in a story someone had stopped reading. Outside, distant church bells rang, muffled by snow and space. Evelyn hadn't gone to church in years, not since the funeral. She used to say she didn't believe in miracles anymore, but the sound of bells made something inside her loosen. Not belief, exactly, but a willingness to be surprised. She fetched a small pair of scissors and carefully cut away matted fur. The dog stayed still, trusting her with his tender places. Evelyn spoke softly as she worked, like she used to with frightened patience. She had been a volunteer at a shelter once, before life turned hard. Her voice returned to that old shape, gentle and sure. When she finished, she took the plastic card and placed it on the table. Found alone, she read again, then closed her eyes. The phrase felt like a mirror held too close to her face. She had been found alone in her own way, for years, not by strangers, but by her own choices, her own retreat. Evelyn stood and opened the ornament box with slow hands. Dust rose, and with it the scent of pine resin and cardboard. A cracked star lay on top, and she traced it with a thumb. She didn't decorate, not yet, but she didn't close the box either. Leaving it open felt like leaving a door unlatched. The dog shuffled closer and sniffed the ornaments, then sneezed softly. Evelyn laughed, a small sound that startled them both. It felt rusty, like a hinge unused, but it still worked. The dog's tail thumped once against the floor, approving, and for one breath, the house sounded alive. She picked up her phone and typed the shelter's number without calling. Her thumb hovered, then moved away, then hovered again. Evelyn looked at the dog, now asleep, chest rising in slow trust. She set the phone down and whispered, "Not yet." It wasn't a solution, but it was her first yes. Evelyn needed something solid, something she could hold. She lifted the dog's collar tag again and turned it over. There, beneath the barcode, was faint writing in pen. Not official, not neat, but unmistakably human. A name, half-smeared, Buddy, and beneath it, please. The word please hit her harder than the name ever could. It was not a demand, not a threat, not a signed goodbye. It was a desperate plea from someone who had run out of choices. Evelyn imagined trembling hands clipping the card to the collar. Whoever left him hadn't been cruel, she realized, just broken. She wrapped Buddy in the blanket and carried him to the couch. His body was lighter than it should have been, too easy to lift. Evelyn felt the fragile truth of him in her arms. He smelled like cold pavement and old smoke and wet fur. And beneath it all, he smelled like a life that still wanted to continue. In the kitchen, she warmed broth and poured a little over his food. Buddy ate more eagerly now, as if warmth had awakened appetite. Evelyn watched him, then watched herself watching him. She recognized the feeling rising in her chest, attachment. It scared her, but it also steadied her, like a hand on her back. She checked the weather on her phone, pretending it was practical. Snow all day, roads slick, temperatures dropping by evening. If she took him to the shelter today, he would ride through storms. If she kept him, she would cross a different storm, internal and old. Evelyn's mind searched for the easiest path, but her heart refused. Buddy walked to the window and stared at the whitened street. His ears drooped, and he made a sound like a small cough. Evelyn frowned, noticing the slight tremor in his back leg. Age, pain, maybe sickness, maybe the slow tax of being unwanted. She felt anger rise, not at a person, but at the world's carelessness. She sat beside him and whispered, "All right, Bobby." The name felt strange on her tongue, like trying on a new future. Bobby looked at her, then rested his head against her shoulder. Evelyn closed her eyes, and for the first time that morning, she rested too. The day was changing shape, and she was changing with it. Evelyn found herself cleaning as if preparing for company. She swept the hallway, wiped the counters, folded towels twice. It wasn't about dust, it was about control, about calming her mind. Buddy followed her slowly, nails clicking in a patient rhythm. His presence turned chores into companionship, and that frightened her. She noticed his breathing wasn't quite even when he lay down. A soft wheeze threaded through his exhale like a thin whistle. Evelyn knelt beside him and listened, her old instincts returning. She had spent years avoiding caretaking, as if it were a trap. Now, it called to her with the quiet authority of love. Her mind whispered, "Don't get attached. Don't make this your world." It reminded her of her daughter's last Christmas at home. Years ago. The argument, the slammed door, the text messages that stopped coming. Evelyn had told herself she had been right, that boundaries mattered, but rightness was a cold blanket, and it never warmed her bones. She opened the refrigerator and stared at leftovers she hadn't wanted. Then, she cooked anyway, a simple meal that smelled like childhood. Butter sizzling, onions softening, the gentle crackle of bread in a pan. Buffy lifted his head at the sounds, eyes brightening with interest. Evelyn realized she missed cooking for someone, even if someone had 4 legs. She took a photo of Buddy and almost sent it to her daughter. Her thumb hovered over the contact she hadn't tapped in months. She imagined the reply she wanted and the silence she feared. The phone felt heavy, like it carried all her unfinished apologies. Evelyn set it down, heart pounding, ashamed of how afraid she still was. Buddy limped slightly when he stood, favoring his left side. Evelyn's chest clenched, because pain demanded action. She searched for a nearby emergency vet, then closed the browser. Money wasn't the real obstacle. She knew it was vulnerability. Taking him in meant admitting she cared enough to try. Night began to fall early, as it always did, in late December. The windows darkened into mirrors, reflecting Evelyn's lonely silhouette. Buddy lay on the rug, head on his paws, eyes half open. Evelyn sat beside him, hand on his ribs, feeling each breath count. Love, she thought, was not a feeling, it was a decision made again and again. She whispered, "I can't lose you," and surprised herself with the words. Buddy's tail moved once, as if he heard the truth beneath them. Evelyn swallowed hard, realizing she hadn't meant only the dog. She had meant the last chance to be the woman she wanted to be. And that was a heavier, braver kind of caring. Evelyn found the old photo album in the closet while looking for bandages. It fell onto the floor with a dull thud, spilling years onto the carpet. Pictures slid out like silent witnesses, glossy and unforgiving. She sat down, the way people sit when the past grabs their ankles. Buddy limped over and rested near her, close enough to be comforting. There was a photo of her at 30, laughing beside a Christmas tree. Her daughter, small, then wore a reindeer headband and missing front teeth. Her husband stood behind them, arms around both eyes crinkled with joy. Evelyn stared until the image blurred, grief softening into something else. Not only pain, but longing, sharp as winter air. She remembered the year everything shifted, the year her mother died in December. Evelyn had been the strong one, the organizer, the steady voice. She had cooked, hosted, smiled, and swallowed her sorrow like medicine. After that, Christmas felt like a performance she couldn't keep up, so she quit, quietly at first, then completely, like closing curtains forever. Buddy nudged a photo with his nose, as if asking what it was. Evelyn laughed softly, then stopped, because laughter felt like betrayal. She heard her mother's voice in her mind, saying, "Let joy in, honey." Evelyn had resisted joy for years, thinking it made her careless, but Buddy's gentle insistence made her wonder if joy could be careful too. She looked at another photo, one taken the last year her daughter visited. They stood in the kitchen, smiling too tightly, tension hiding in the corners. Evelyn recalled the argument afterward, about choices, about pride, about distance. Words had flown like knives, and neither of them had ducked. When her daughter left, the silence that followed became Evelyn's companion. Buddy's breathing rasped again, and Evelyn snapped back to the present. She realized how quickly time moved, how quickly chances closed. If she waited for the right moment to repair things, it might never come. Christmas, she understood, was not a date on a calendar. It was an opening, and openings did not stay open forever. Evelyn gathered the photos carefully and slid them back into the album. She didn't lock it away this time. She set it on the coffee table. Buddy rested his head on her knee, warm and trusting. Evelyn stared at the blank corner where a tree could stand. For the first time, she didn't feel foolish for wanting it. She stood and pulled the ornament box fully into the room. Her hands shook as she lifted the lid, like she was unsealing a vow. Buddy watched, ears perked, as if he sensed something sacred beginning. Evelyn whispered, "Maybe this year," and the words sounded possible. And possibility, she realized, was the first ingredient of a miracle. Evelyn found an old artificial tree in the garage, still in its dusty bag. It wasn't glamorous, but it was intact, branches folded like sleeping arms. She dragged it inside, leaving a trail of snowmelt and determination. Buddy followed. slow but curious, sniffing the bag as if it held secrets. Evelyn's breath came faster, not from effort, but from emotion. She set the tree up in the bare corner, hands clumsy with rusted habit. The metal stand clicked into place with a stubborn snap. When she plugged in the lights, only half of them worked. She stared at the uneven glow and felt tears rise unexpectedly. Perfect, she thought, has never been the point. Buddy sat near the tree and watched the lights flicker. Their reflections danced in his eyes, turning him briefly into a puppy again. Evelyn sat beside him and touched the warm bulbs carefully. The room looked different, softer, as if shadows had learned to share space. A quiet joy arrived, not loud, but undeniable. She dug through the ornament box and found the cracked star. She held it up, saw the fracture line, saw the years inside it, then she hung it anyway, letting it face the room without shame. Buddy wagged his tail twice, like he approved of honesty. Evelyn laughed again, and this time she let the sound stay. The next act of courage was smaller and harder than the tree. Evelyn picked up her phone and opened her daughter's contact. The name stared back at her, familiar and distant. Her thumb hovered, and her chest tightened with the old fear. Then she typed 3 words, "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." She stared at the message, reread it, wanted to add 1,000 things. "I'm sorry, I miss you. I didn't know how. I still love you." Instead, she kept it simple, because simple was all she could manage today. She hit send and felt her stomach drop, like stepping off a ledge. Buddy pressed his shoulder against her leg, steadying her without trying. Minutes passed like hours, each one filled with imagined outcomes. No reply, a cold reply, an angry reply, or the worst, nothing forever. Evelyn stood and cleaned the kitchen again, hands trembling as they moved. Buddy lay near the tree, breathing a little easier, as if hope helped him too. Evelyn realized she had done it, she had reached out, and that mattered. When the reply finally came, the phone chimed softly, almost shy. Evelyn's heart raced as she opened it, bracing for impact. The message was short, and it cracked her open in the gentlest way. "Miss you too," it read. "Are you okay?" Evelyn covered her mouth and cried into her own hand. Not alone anymore. Evelyn called the local vet clinic and left a message, voice unsteady. She described Buddy's wheeze, his limp, his age, his quiet sadness. Hearing herself speak like a guardian felt strange, like a new identity. She hung up and stared at Buddy, who blinked slowly at her. In his calm, she saw courage she didn't know she needed. Her daughter called a few minutes later, and Evelyn nearly dropped the phone. The voice on the line was older now, steadier, but still her child. They stumbled through greetings, through cautious kindness, through missed years. Evelyn didn't mention the fight, didn't demand forgiveness. She simply said, "I'm here," and it sounded like a bridge being built. Evelyn told her about Buddy, and there was silence on the line. Then her daughter exhaled and said, "Mom, that sounds like you." The words landed gently but carried weight, like a blessing. Evelyn's eyes filled again, because she had forgotten who she used to be. The woman who cared, who helped, who didn't run from tenderness. After the call ended, Evelyn felt the old fear creep back in. What if Bati got worse? What if the vet found something cruel in his lungs? What if her daughter's kindness was temporary? A holiday softness that would fade? Evelyn stared at the half-lit tree, its imperfect glow suddenly fragile. Hope, she realized, was always accompanied by the risk of pain. That evening, Buddy coughed harder, and Evelyn's panic sharpened. She bundled him into the car, blanket around him like armor. Snow fell in thick, slow flakes, turning headlights into floating halos. Evelyn drove carefully, both hands gripping the wheel as if it were her last chance. The world outside was blurred white, but her purpose was painfully clear. At the emergency vet, fluorescent lights returned her to old hospital memories. The waiting room smelled of disinfectant and wet fur and worry. Buddy leaned against her, trembling, and she whispered his name like a promise. When the technician took him back, Evelyn's arms felt suddenly empty. She sat down and realized she had opened her heart again, and now it was exposed. The vet returned with a gentle face and careful words. Buddy had a heart murmur and signs of chronic airway irritation. Not an immediate death sentence, but a reminder that time was not endless. Medication could help, comfort could help, love would help most of all. Evelyn nodded, tears sliding down silently, because she understood the assignment. Driving home, Buddy slept in the passenger seat, breathing a bit smoother. Evelyn watched him and felt the fear still there, but smaller now. She whispered, "We'll do this together," and believed herself enough to try. The road home looked different, not shorter, but warmer somehow. Because she wasn't just afraid of losing, she was finally choosing to keep. The next morning, Evelyn woke before dawn, listening for Buddy's breathing. The house was dark, and the tree lights glowed like quiet guardians. Buddy lay on his blanket, chest rising steadily, medicine already helping. Evelyn felt relief spread through her like sunlight finally entering a room. Then she felt the deeper truth. Relief meant she had something to lose. She made oatmeal and added a little warm broth for Buddy's bowl. He ate slowly, then looked up, waiting for her next move. Evelyn realized he expected patterns now, a routine, a home. That expectation was a soft kind of responsibility, not heavy, but real. She whispered, "I'm not sending you away." The words surprised her with their firmness. She had avoided firm promises for years, terrified of breaking them. But this was not a promise about forever, only about today. Today, she would stay, and she would let him stay too. Sometimes staying was the bravest thing a person could do. Evelyn called the shelter number and asked for the intake desk. When the staff member answered, Evelyn felt her throat tighten again. She explained that she had found Buddy on her porch, caller card attached. The woman sighed and said, "That happens more than you'd think." Evelyn closed her eyes, anger and compassion twisting together. She asked if anyone had reported him missing, and the answer was no. No frantic owner, no posters, no calls, no social media scramble. Evelyn felt a grief that wasn't only for Buddy. It was for every creature and every person left quietly behind. She said, "I want to foster," and heard herself mean it. The shelter worker's tone softened, like a door opening in a stranger's voice. She explained the paperwork, the check-in visits, the adoption options. Evelyn listened, nodding, feeling the shape of a new chapter forming. When the call ended, she stared at Buddy, who watched her calmly. Evelyn whispered, "You're not a burden, you're a beginning." She put a small stocking on the mantel that afternoon. It was an old one, faded red, but it still held its shape. She wrote Buddy on a tag and tied it on with twine. Buddy sniffed it, then sneezed again, making Evelyn laugh through tears. And in that laughter, she felt herself choosing life, again. Evelyn's daughter, Claire, texted later, "I'm off work early today." Evelyn stared at the message until the letters looked unreal. Her heart thudded, and fear tried to reclaim the steering wheel. But Buddy nudged her hand, grounding her in the present. Evelyn typed back, "Want to come by?" The hours before Claire arrived felt like the longest countdown. Evelyn vacuumed twice, then stopped, realizing she was hiding in tasks. She set out 2 mugs and didn't apologize for it this time. She placed ginger cookies on a plate, the kind Claire loved as a child. The smell of cinnamon filled the kitchen, and the air felt less defensive. When the doorbell rang, Evelyn's body went stiff with old reflex. She opened the door and saw Claire standing there, cheeks pink from cold. Her daughter's eyes widened at the tree lights, the stocking, the warmth. Then she noticed Buddy, sitting quietly beside Evelyn like a sentinel. Claire's face softened, and Evelyn felt something inside her loosen. Claire stepped in slowly, as if entering a place she wasn't sure she belonged. Evelyn wanted to say a perfect sentence, one that fixed everything. Instead, she said, "Hi," and let the word carry years of longing. Claire replied, "Hi, Mom," voice trembling around the edges. They stood there, 2 women learning each other again. Buffy walked up and pressed his nose to Claire's hand. Claire knelt, eyes filling as she stroked his head. "He's old," she whispered, as if speaking too loudly might break him. Evelyn nodded and said, "He found me," then corrected herself. "I found him," she said, and felt the truth settle. They sat at the table with coffee, the mugs warm between their palms. Conversation came in small pieces, like broken ornaments being repaired. Work, weather, the drive over, the snow, the music on the radio. Then silence, thick but not hostile, simply heavy with what remained unsaid. Evelyn breathed through it and didn't run. Claire looked around and said, "I forgot your house could feel like this." Evelyn swallowed and replied, "I forgot to." Buddy lay near their feet, sighing like a contented witness. Outside, snow continued to fall, but inside the room held light. And for the first time in years, Evelyn's home sounded like belonging. After coffee, Claire helped Evelyn hang a few more ornaments. Their hands brushed occasionally, and each touch felt like a question. Buffy watched from the rug, tail thumping softly when they laughed. Evelyn's chest felt full and fragile, like a glass ornament in sunlight. She knew they couldn't decorate their way around the past. Claire paused with an ornament shaped like a tiny lighthouse. "I made this in 3rd grade," she said, voice quiet. Evelyn remembered the school glue, the glitter that never fully dried. She remembered praising it, then rushing away to answer a work call. The memory stung, because love had been present, but attention had been missing. Evelyn took a breath and said, "I'm sorry, Claire. Not, I'm sorry if, not, I'm sorry, but just the simple truth." Claire's eyes lifted, startled, as if she hadn't expected surrender. Evelyn continued, "I was proud, and I was scared, and I got sharp." Her voice shook, but she held it steady with effort. Claire swallowed hard, gripping the ornament until her knuckles whitened. "I was sharp too," she admitted, tears gathering without falling yet. Evelyn nodded, because she didn't come to win, she came to heal. "I missed you," Evelyn said, letting the words stand without excuse. The sentence felt like taking off armor and trusting the air not to hurt. Claire's tears finally fell, silent at first, then unstoppable. She covered her face, and Evelyn moved toward her, slow and careful. For a moment Evelyn hesitated, remembering the last time she tried. Then she wrapped her arms around Claire, and Claire leaned in fully. Their sobs mingled, not dramatic, just honest, the sound of thawing. Bobby stood and pressed against their legs, sharing warmth in his own way. Claire reached down and scratched behind his ears, still crying. "I can't believe someone left him," she whispered, voice raw. Evelyn replied, "People leave when they're drowning." She looked at Claire and added, "But we don't have to keep leaving." They sat on the couch afterward, exhausted, like survivors after a storm. Claire rested her head on Evelyn's shoulder, tentative but real. Evelyn stared at the half-lit tree and felt something settle in her bones. Forgiveness wasn't a switch, it was a practice, a daily return. And today, she had returned, without armor, without running. That afternoon, Claire insisted on helping with Buddy's medication schedule. She wrote times on a notepad, neat handwriting like her grandmother's. Evelyn watched her daughter move around the kitchen with gentle confidence. The sight made Evelyn ache with both regret and pride. This was who Claire had become, even without Evelyn's daily presence. They went for a short walk as snow softened into slow drifting. Buddy wore an old scarf Evelyn found in a drawer, tied carefully. He moved slower than they did, but he moved with purpose. Each step seemed to claim the sidewalk as his, as if life could be reclaimed. Evelyn held the leash, but it felt like Buddy was leading her. Neighbors waved from porches, surprised to see Evelyn outside. Evelyn waved back, feeling awkward and strangely new. Claire laughed and said, "They're going to think you joined the living again." Evelyn smiled and replied, "Maybe I did." Buddy sniffed the snow and sneezed, making them both laugh louder. When they returned, Claire pulled out her phone and took a photo. Evelyn almost protested, then let it happen, deciding not to hide. In the picture, the tree glowed behind them, Buddy between their knees. It looked like a family photo, not perfect, but real. Claire posted it to her private feed with a caption, "Home." Later, Claire said quietly, "I didn't come just because it's Christmas." Evelyn looked at her, heart suddenly tense again. Claire continued, "I came because your text sounded different." Evelyn nodded, understanding that tone could carry truth better than explanations. She whispered, "I'm trying." And Claire answered, "I see that." Evelyn offered Claire a gift from the closet, wrapped in plain paper. It was a small box containing her mother's silver locket. Claire opened it and gasped, fingers trembling over the engraved initials. "I thought you'd keep this forever," Claire said, voice cracked. Evelyn replied, "Forever is only good if it's shared." Claire put the locket on and stood, eyes shining. Evelyn touched the chain gently, feeling generations in the metal. Buddy lay at their feet, breathing quietly, as if keeping time. Evelyn realized family wasn't only who stayed from the beginning. Sometimes family was who returned, and who welcomed the return. That night, they ate dinner together with simple gratitude. No fancy table setting, no forced cheer, just warmth and presence. Buddy slept near the tree, the stocking with his name hanging above him. Evelyn looked at Claire and felt something steady replace the old fear. This was a different kind of family, built from honesty, not perfection. On December 26th, the world looked the same, but Evelyn did not. The trees still glowed, lights uneven, yet somehow more beautiful now. Bothy woke and stretched, then walked to Evelyn with quiet confidence. Claire slept on the couch under a blanket, hair spilled like childhood again. Evelyn stood in the doorway and let herself feel it fully. She brewed coffee and listened to the small sounds of a lived-in home. The heater hum, the soft tick of the clock, Buddy's nails on the floor. These sounds used to annoy her when she was tense and lonely. Now they sounded like proof, like life choosing to stay. Evelyn realized peace was not silence, peace was safety. Claire woke and rubbed her eyes, smiling before she could stop herself. "Morning," she said, voice sleepy and unguarded. Evelyn smiled back, letting the moment be simple and unearned. Buddy wagged his tail as if celebrating the fact that mornings still came. Evelyn thought, "This is what I forgot. Continuation is a gift." They drove Buddy to the shelter later, not to surrender him, but to sign papers. The lobby smelled like disinfectant and hope, both sharp and sincere. A volunteer offered Buddy a treat, and he took it gently from her palm. Evelyn watched and felt her heart steady, not possessive, just committed. She signed her name on the foster to adopt form with calm hands. On the way home, Claire said, "You know you'll be good at this." Evelyn glanced at her, surprised by the certainty in her daughter's tone. "I used to be," Evelyn replied, then corrected herself with a small laugh. "I still am," she said, and the words felt like a reclaimed identity. Buddy looked out the window, ears lifting as if he agreed. Back at the house, Evelyn opened the ornament box again and found the star. She held it up in the daylight, the crack line clear and unapologetic. She hung it higher this time, where it could catch more light. Claire watched and said, "It's my favorite now." Evelyn nodded, because the broken things had carried them here. Later, Evelyn texted Claire's number, though Claire sat in the same room. It was a promise disguised as a joke. "Don't wait until next Christmas." Claire smiled and replied, "I won't," then reached over and squeezed Evelyn's hand. Buddy sighed contentedly, head resting on Evelyn's foot like an anchor. Evelyn felt something settle. Love didn't guarantee safety, but it guaranteed meaning. That evening, Evelyn stepped onto the porch and looked at the street. Snow had melted into glittering patches, reflecting the porch light softly. She remembered the knock that started everything and felt gratitude rise. Not for magic, not for perfect endings, but for opened doors. Because the real miracle wasn't who arrived, it was who she became when she opened.